The story begins in Belmarsh, a terrifying prison in London that holds murderers, rapists, and other dangerous criminals. Among the prisoners is Kane Burgess, a muscular man with a scarred face. His appearance is brutal, and his time in prison has hardened him emotionally and physically. Inside, however, he is a good person, but the harsh environment of the prison has changed him. It has turned him into someone capable of killing with his bare hands. One somber day, Kane is escorted under tight security to visit his sick mother in the hospital. When he arrives at her bedside, he realizes she has just passed away. The thought that he could have said goodbye if he had arrived a little earlier deeply saddens him. However, he does not show his emotions. Years in prison have taught him to hide his feelings. After spending a brief moment with his mother, Kane prepares to leave. In the elevator with the guards, Kane suddenly launches a violent attack. His actions are swift and brutal, leaving the guards with no time to react. Despite their attempts to resist, Kane easily overpowers them. The fight is so intense that the guards are knocked out and their bodies fall through the elevator floor. Kane takes advantage of the chaos and escapes through the hospital's back door. Later, Kane attempts to enter a private bar but is stopped by the bouncers. A fight breaks out, but Kane, with his strength and skill, defeats them easily. Inside the bar, he meets a cheeky and talkative bartender named Bez. During a calm interaction, Kane introduces himself as a member and orders a long glass of beer. While Kane sips his drink, he listens closely to a group of people sitting on the opposite side of the bar. They are members of a gang that has recently been quiet due to two troubling events: the murder of one of their members, Rook, and the disappearance of their accountant. The conversation focuses on Rook's death, and one of the gang members, Toon, starts sharing what happened. Toon explains that on the night of the murder, they were selling drugs at their usual spot when they noticed someone standing nearby, staring at them in the dark. The figure's presence was unsettling. While Toon dealt with a customer, Rook, showing no fear, decided to confront the person. Rook tried to figure out what the stranger wanted and why they were watching. When the figure did not respond, Rook became angry and attempted to punch them. Before Rook could land the punch, the stranger struck him with an axe, severing Rook's hand. Rook fell to the ground, bleeding heavily. Toon claims that after witnessing this, he chased the killer and managed to make him run away in fear. Hearing this, Kane cannot hold back his laughter. He mocks Toon, suggesting that he is not strong enough to scare anyone into fleeing. Kane accuses Toon of lying and says that it was actually Toon who ran away like a coward after Rook was killed. Toon becomes furious at Kane's words and starts threatening him. The entire gang supports Toon and prepares to fight Kane. However, Kane suddenly reveals that he is the maniac responsible for Rook's murder. The gang, terrified by this confession, backs off immediately, too afraid to confront him. Bez begins shouting, demanding that Kane leave the bar immediately. And as she screams, the bouncers Kane had previously knocked out regain consciousness and enter the bar. They try to attack him again, but Kane quickly overpowers them. With little effort, he defeats them and pulls out a double-barreled shotgun, demonstrating just how dangerous he can be. Kane then takes control of the situation, effectively holding the gang hostage. He demands to know the location of their boss, Lincoln, a corrupt businessman and loan shark who will do anything to earn illegal money. Ironically, Lincoln is also Kane's brother. Instead of Lincoln, the gang presents Hyde, Lincoln's trusted assistant, who instantly recognizes Kane. Hyde introduces Kane to the rest of the gang as Lincoln's brother, someone who made a mistake and ended up in prison. He doesn't hold back from mocking Kane, ridiculing his facial scars, and even hinting at possible mistreatment Kane might have faced during his time in prison. As the tension grows, one of the bouncers attempts to attack Kane again. Before the bouncer can reach him, Kane shoots him in the kneecap, shattering his leg. The bouncer collapses to the ground, screaming in pain. Kane, showing no mercy, kicks him in the face, knocking him unconscious. Despite the violence Kane displays, Hyde remains skeptical that Kane is the one who killed Rook. This doubt stems from Toon's earlier remarks. To eliminate any uncertainty, Kane reveals Rook's severed hand, which he has been carrying in a plastic bag. He tosses it to Toon, who reluctantly opens it, leaving no room for further doubt. Now that everyone realizes Kane is a cold-blooded and ruthless killer, armed with a shotgun, they have no choice but to follow his commands. After violently beating Hyde, Kane blames him and Lincoln for the events that led to his imprisonment. He then orders Hyde to call Lincoln and bring him to the bar. With the gang subdued, Kane decides to narrate his story, showing no hesitation in letting them know how he became the person he is. He begins by describing his life a few years ago when he was just a struggling boxer. During that time, Kane approached his brother Lincoln to ask for money to start a business. Lincoln, however, was playing cards with his gang, including Rook and his accountant, Stokes. The three were in bad moods because they had lost bets on Kane, as he couldn't even lose a boxing match when it would have benefited them financially. Before Lincoln could answer Kane's request, Rook mocked and insulted Kane for making such an absurd proposal. Following Rook's lead, Lincoln initially refuses to lend Kane the money, blaming it on Kane's poor track record. As Kane prepares to leave, Lincoln stops him and offers a deal. He would lend Kane the money if Kane completed a task for him. Having no other options, Kane agrees without knowing the details of the job. Kane is sent to Hyde's office where he is briefed about his task. He is told to steal a plastic bag from a poor woman and bring it back to the office. The task seems simple, so Kane goes through with it. However, after he steals the bag, the woman begins chasing him desperately, as if her life depends on retrieving it. The chase continues until the woman tragically gets hit by a car. Stunned by what just happened, Kane is immediately arrested at the scene. A few days later, Kane meets Detective O'Hara, an elite officer who has spent years investigating Lincoln's criminal activities. During their conversation, O'Hara reveals the dark truth about Lincoln's loan business. Lincoln targets vulnerable individuals who need loans. After lending the money, Lincoln's team steals it back before the victims can use it, forcing them deeper into debt. This eventually leads to a point where the business seizes all of the prey's personal property, including their home and vehicle. The detective asks Kane to betray Lincoln and expose his crimes. However, despite learning about all of Lincoln's evil actions, Kane refuses to turn against his brother. He chooses to remain loyal, even though this decision ties him to 3 serious charges: robbery, manslaughter, and organized crime. Kane holds on to the hope that his brother will eventually help him, which keeps him from giving up. Soon, Kane is introduced to Sergeant Evans, a muscular and tough interrogator known for his violent methods. Evans is a corrupt cop who tortures suspects to force confessions, often without permission from detectives. Kane is severely beaten during the interrogation. Even though he tries to resist, his hands are tied, and Evans's relentless punches eventually knock him unconscious. As a result, Kane is sent to Belmarsh Prison, a place infamous for its filthy and violent conditions. It is also nicknamed the Meat Grinder because of the brutality inside. Having no previous criminal record, Kane faces numerous challenges in this harsh environment. On his very first day, he is attacked by a strong inmate for no apparent reason. Kane defends himself, but the fight quickly escalates into a massive brawl involving multiple inmates. Although Kane manages to knock down several attackers, he is eventually overpowered. The group beats him ruthlessly and even breaks his front teeth. Following this incident, Kane receives metal dentures, which he surprisingly comes to like. The dentures give him a more fearsome appearance, which suits his new reality in prison. During this time, Kane's mother, still alive, visits him in jail. Mrs. Burgess informs Kane that Lincoln blames him for the events that led to his imprisonment. She tells him that Lincoln has decided not to take any action to help him, leaving Kane to face the consequences alone. Upon learning that Lincoln has abandoned him, Kane feels betrayed. His loyalty to his brother seems meaningless now, especially since Lincoln is the reason Kane ended up in prison. Despite this harsh realization, Kane keeps his spirits up and asks his mother to ensure that Lincoln contacts him. Days pass, but there is no word from Lincoln. No visits, no phone calls, not even a letter. Kane finally understands that he is completely alone and must rely only on himself to survive. During his time in prison, Kane is frequently attacked by other inmates. Never knowing the reasons behind these assaults, left with no choice, he starts defending himself. To prepare for future attacks, Kane begins a rigorous physical and mental training program, pushing himself to the limits every day. One day in the prison yard, Kane is attacked by 2 prisoners. Thanks to his intense training, he manages to knock them down easily with just a few punches. While feeling triumphant over his victory, one of the beaten prisoners reveals something shocking. Lincoln has placed a 20,000-pound bounty on Kane's head. This bounty is the reason Kane is constantly targeted by other inmates. Hearing this fills Kane with rage. He finally has a reason to keep fighting. His desire for vengeance against those who have destroyed his life drives him forward. The bounty on his head attracts more prisoners every day, but with each fight, Kane becomes stronger, both physically and mentally. His determination grows alongside the number of his enemies. Each battle leaves Kane with injuries, adds months to his sentence, and earns him days in solitary confinement. The prisoners use anything they can as weapons against him. At one point, they even use a homemade version of napalm, a flammable chemical liquid, which burns part of Kane's face. The pain and constant attacks slowly transform him into a merciless, bloodthirsty monster. He no longer recognizes himself as the person he once was. His sole objective becomes survival at any cost. In his struggle to stay alive, Kane spares no one. He shows no mercy, even to prison guards. Several guards are seriously injured in his violent outbursts. Kane has been in prison for 3 years when his mother visits him with devastating news. She tells him she has pancreatic cancer and doesn't have much time left. Hearing this shatters Kane, but he doesn't share with her the terrible truth about Lincoln's betrayal. As her only confidant, he chooses to protect her from the pain of knowing what her other son has done. Time passes, and Mrs. Burgess's health continues to deteriorate. One day, Detective O'Hara visits Kane, who is in the hospital recovering from another violent conflict with inmates. During their conversation, Kane learns something shocking. Sergeant Evans, the corrupt officer who tortured him, was actually working as a spy for Lincoln. He realizes Evans was one of Lincoln's ears in the system, keeping tabs on him. Detective O'Hara informs Kane that Evans has been fired after the detective discovered his betrayal. O'Hara also confirms what Kane already suspects, that Lincoln wants him dead. The detective once again asks Kane to give up Lincoln. This time, Kane agrees, but only on one condition. He wants a final meeting with his dying mother. This agreement leads to the scene shown at the beginning of the story. Kane creates an escape plan during his hospital visit and successfully uses it to break free, starting his journey of revenge. Returning to the present, two gang members plead with Kane to let them use the restroom, but Kane refuses and orders them to handle it where they are. Hyde, tired of listening to Kane's long and unsettling stories, tries to act brave and challenges him. Kane responds by forcing Hyde to kneel. He warns him that anything he says next will be the last thing he ever says. Lincoln arrives at the bar with three of his men, surprised to find Kane waiting for him. Seeing his brother, who he considers his greatest enemy, Kane becomes even more hostile. He disarms Lincoln and his men with ease and forces them to join the rest of the gang. Kane is ready to unleash his revenge, but first demands an explanation for why Lincoln wanted him dead. After attempting a shallow act of brotherly affection, Lincoln finally admits the truth. He claims that he had no choice but to put a bounty on Kane's head because one of his spies reported that Kane was planning to betray him. Kane, knowing the full story, reveals that this information came from Sergeant Evans. He informs Lincoln that Evans lied to him and that trusting a corrupt officer over his own brother was a fatal mistake. Kane then shares that Evans is no longer a threat, as Kane recently tracked him down at his new workplace and, after a fierce struggle, killed him with a hammer blow to the head. Impressed by Kane's intelligence and careful planning, Lincoln attempts to make peace. He promises Kane a fresh start and a new life. Kane, however, ignores Lincoln's words and turns his attention to Hyde. Without hesitation, he shoots Hyde and delivers a brutal blow to his head, killing him in an agonizing manner. The violence shocks everyone present, and Hyde's gruesome death leaves the gang terrified. Still reeling from the loss of his closest assistant, Lincoln faces another devastating blow. Kane informs him that only £1,500 remain in his account. It becomes clear that Kane's revenge extended beyond Evans. After escaping, Kane also visited Stokes, Lincoln's accountant. Flashing back to the meeting with Stokes, Kane confronts him. Stokes tries to intimidate Kane by pulling out a shotgun, but Kane treats it as a joke and quickly disarms him. Realizing he is no match for Kane, Stokes begs for his life and agrees to do whatever Kane demands. Kane forces him to empty Lincoln's accounts, taking almost all of the money Lincoln had. Kane donates the £2 million he took from Lincoln's account to the families harmed by Lincoln's loan business. With his money gone, Lincoln is left with only his gang for support. Confident in their numbers, Lincoln believes Kane will die that night, as Kane has only 2 bullets left while the gang numbers 10. However, Kane calmly states that he only needs 1 bullet, and it's meant for Lincoln. As the tension rises, Lincoln notices Bez sneaking up behind Kane to attack. Using this as an opportunity, Lincoln continues to taunt Kane, keeping him distracted. While Kane is focused on Lincoln's remarks, Bez smashes a bottle over his head, triggering an intense fight. Kane reacts swiftly, shooting one gang member in the chest, but the others quickly overpower him and manage to disarm him. Unable to fight Kane directly in hand-to-hand combat, the gang resorts to throwing bottles and glasses at him. Bez then provides them with a bag filled with iron rods, hammers, and knives, urging them to finish Kane off. Despite the weapons, Kane's strength, unbreakable resilience, and combat skills allow him to overpower his attackers. He beats them mercilessly, taking each one down. As the chaos unfolds, Toon, as usual, tries to escape, but this time he returns with a submachine gun. In a bizarre twist, none of Toon's shots hit Kane. Instead, Toon accidentally kills one of his own gang members. Kane takes advantage of the situation, seizing the gun from Toon. Armed with the new weapon, Kane uses it to kill several more gang members. The remaining gang members attempt a final assault. They attack Kane with kicks, punches, and knives, but he methodically eliminates them in gruesome ways. One gang member has his arm broken and is struck hard in the head. Another is killed by Kane biting into his neck like a predator. The last one meets his end as Kane stabs him repeatedly in the throat. By the end of the brutal fight, only 3 remain: Bez, Lincoln, and Kane. Lincoln points a shotgun at Kane, revealing that he never cared whether Kane intended to betray him. He admits that he placed a bounty on Kane's head simply because Kane's actions were ruining Lincoln's reputation among his partners. After confessing, Lincoln pulls the trigger, but nothing happens. The gun is empty. Kane, who knew the gun had no bullets, laughs at Lincoln's failure and takes satisfaction in not being tricked by his brother's earlier lies. Enraged and desperate, Lincoln grabs a knife handed to him by Bez and lunges at Kane. A fierce knife fight breaks out between the two brothers. The struggle is intense, but Kane eventually gains the upper hand and stabs Lincoln, delivering long overdue punishment for his brother's evil deeds. With Lincoln defeated, Kane turns to Bez, who remains alive but surrounded by the corpses of the gang she has loyally served for years. Kane, who shows no desire to harm a woman, even one who tried to kill him, spares her and leaves the scene, leaving Bez to face the consequences of her choices. In the final moments, one of Lincoln's former victims checks their account balance and is shocked to find money deposited. This indicates that Kane has been able to partially atone for his brother's misdeeds by redistributing the stolen wealth.